go. And welcome to the 25th Annual Capital Conference Virtual Edition. Our goal that each session is about an hour in length. However, we may go a little longer, we may be shorter. My name is David Stevens, and I am happy to introduce our State Contest Director, Dr. Bradley Wilson, who is going to present our current issues and events session today. So Bradley, thank you for being with us today and sharing your wisdom and knowledge and all things that you love about current issues and events.
Awesome. Well, we've certainly got a lot to talk about. And just think, a year ago, we were all Zoom novices, and now we're all Zoom experts. So how far we've come in a year. And I told David before we got started, I made sure to do things like test the audio visual and secure my dog so that he doesn't interrupt our presentation. So we'll see if that happens, 50-50. So welcome to everybody. I see a lot of new faces in the room, and I can see most of you on one screen, but just sort of raise your hand, just your real hand. Raise your hand if this is your first year. How many first years do we have? All right, a couple first years. How about second years? Second years, and then we've got Richard. How long have you been doing this, Richard? A whole bunch. All right, there we go, a whole bunch. All right. So I know we've got some experts in the group. You guys, please don't hesitate to chime in. David wasn't kidding when he said turn off the mute at any point. If you want to jump in, please just jump in. Don't hesitate. Some of us have been through this a number of times, and I've got some new stuff in here and some new things for you to think about as we go through it. But I always like to start by talking about why we're here and why current events I think is important to our curriculum, regardless of whether it's a component of UIL or a component of government class or a component of a journalism class. So I always start off with just a few slides, kind of putting things in context. This first one's from a Florida teacher in 2019, before the pandemic. It's more important than ever for our students to learn to listen to various viewpoints, to synthesize information, and to form their own opinions. It's also important that they begin to see themselves as actors of change from a young age. Implementing current events in the classroom is a strategy that will keep students aware of real-world problems and situations. And certainly that's no less true in 2021 than it was in 2019. And it's sort of at the core of everything that I think about UIL, current issues and events, and journalism, and all the other related contests to that. And there are more than a few that tie into this. Look at some numbers, and some of you have seen these before, so they're not new to you, but and they probably don't come as a surprise to any of us. And I actually thought about putting this in quiz form today, but I changed my mind. 26% of the respondents believe that Brett Kavanaugh is the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and 14% of the respondents selected Anton Scalia, who died in 2016. So my first question, and I love doing this, is, all right, who is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? Because he was all over the news today. Anybody, chime in, jump in.
John Roberts.
That would be the second quietest man in the Supreme Court, John Roberts, right?
Right, you got it, John Roberts. And that's going to come back to play here in a little bit. But he was all over the news today because the opinion on the NCAA that came out yesterday, which was a fascinating opinion and one you might want to read if you haven't had a chance. 18% of respondents identified Congresswoman Alexandra, I looked at how to pronounce this and I forgot already. Cortez, a Democrat from New York, a freshman member of the current Congress, is author of the New Deal, a suite of public programs enacted by President Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s. So think about that. 1 out of 5 people thought that a new congressperson was the author of something from the 1930s. And this data is not that old. 12% of respondents understand the relationship between the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment and correctly answered that the 13th Amendment freed all the slaves in the United States. So basically 1 out of 10. And the numbers don't get much better. 53% of Americans think it is accurate to say that immigrants who are here illegally do not have any rights under the United States Constitution. 37% can't name any of the rights guaranteed under the First Amendment. All right, there's 5, go. Who can get them all? Jacqueline, you want to jump in? Julie? This is the interactive
Freedom of
part.
speech.
Speech.
Press.
Press.
From or for religion.
Religion, the first one, right? Robert, come on, jump in.
Assembly and petition the government
Assembly
for a
and-
redress of grievances.
Correct. See, you guys are really good. And guns is not in the First Amendment, despite 30-something% of my students who are freshmen at a four-year college thinking that the right to bear arms is in the First Amendment. 74% can't name all three branches of government. My students, my freshmen in college, are actually better at that one than they are naming the freedoms under the First Amendment. So this plays out, and you see this keep playing out even in modern media. A new survey showed that web trafficking data found that Americans viewed 12 times as many pages about Miley the Twerker as they did Syria the Damned, New York Magazine's popular fashion blog. So yeah, we're just gonna let that one go. So sort of wind this piece of the presentation down, more than ever, an appreciation for news and our civic institutions is a key step towards self-empowerment and advancement. And then to tie it back to us as educators, it's our job to make sure that students are armed with the tools necessary to distinguish between fact, opinion, and plain old opinion, between research or evidence-based statements and empty rhetoric, between exaggeration and reputable journalism, not just factoids from Facebook, Twitter, or other information feeds. In fact, I know actually quite a few four-year colleges and universities, and big ones now, are teaching entire courses in media literacy simply because of this problem right here. And then on our good friend Twitter, we find from National Public Radio, we know that if you study civics in high school, you are more likely to be an informed voter. So that's a good thing, right? I think we all think that's a good thing. And there's an interesting election going on in New York today, if you watch the news, about the ranked order voting. And that's going to change the way we vote in America. And I think it's going to catch on. But then they showed a fake ballot, a ballot that ABC News had made up this morning. I'm like, man, if you show that to people, you're going to scare them away. Don't do that. Because ranked order ballot is really simple. You just rank first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or whatever. And then, but they showed all the entire matrices. I'm like, oh my God, it's going to scare everybody. So that's something to watch out for. So let me start here with a little assessment of this group, and let's just see how savvy this group really is. The third named storm of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season made landfall on the Gulf Coast. What was its name?
Claudette.
I got one vote for B, Claudette. Anybody else? Oh, so that was too easy. Too easy, got a Claudette. That was too easy. How about this one? This past weekend, United States President Joe Biden made Juneteenth a federal holiday. It is an observation of the day in 1865 when enslaved people in what city learned that they'd been freed 2 years earlier? Teresa?
Yep.
Julie? Ooh.
Galveston.
Galveston.
Galveston. All right, so this is a very savvy group. So first we saw a national question. This is a Texas question, and then an international question. With the voter turnout at a record low of 48.8%, voters in what country elected Raisi as their new president?
Iran.
I got one vote for Iran. Lots of votes for Iran. Excellent. All right. So just a couple things here as we go through these questions. Let's see if my computer will let me go back. Is it letting me go back? Yeah. All right. So what do all of those things have in common there? What do all of the answers have in common? Ooh, Jacqueline's looking hard. Well, three of the four have something in common, I guess. Three of the four are thirds. So Cristobal was the third named hurricane last year. Gamma would be the third if they went into the next sequence after they run out of named storms. And then Claudette was the third named storm this year, right? So I point that out to go, as we go through this discussion, we're gonna have a little bit of discussion this year in this session about the distractors, because some people are calling me on some of the distractors. So I'm gonna talk about the distractors a little bit today. What about this one? What are these things? What's Sharpsburg, Maryland?
That would be the site of the bloodiest battle of the Civil War for a single day.
There you go. And Palmetto Ranch, Texas.
I put in the chat, I think that's the last battle of the Civil War, correct?
Very good, very good. The last battle of the Civil War. So if you know it's in Texas, but you're not really sure where, that's a really good distractor, right? Palmetto Ranch is opposed to Galveston, and Gettysburg, of course, is where Lincoln delivered his very short speech that lasted on. So as we go on, we're going to talk a little bit more about the distractors. For example, this one has all countries that had presidential elections in it. So Iran's the right answer, but all of those countries had presidential elections, and it just happened through random chance that I had 2 I's and 2 A's. I don't know why that. All right, so for those of you that are new or just need a reminder because it's summer and you've slept since then, this question, the format for the test has not changed. Don't see it changing anytime soon. 40 objective questions, an essay question worth 10 points. We're very succinct and to the point, unlike the social studies test that takes twice as many questions to get the same amount of content. But we'll have that debate tomorrow during the essay, or Thursday during the essay one. And you got 60 minutes to do it, and the top score individual, and then we take the top 3 individuals for the team. Right? Remember, only the objective score counts for the team, not the objective plus the essay. You can enter 4, I gotta move that screen. You can enter 4 students at district. Nothing has changed there. And 3 students advance from district to regional to state, and 4 members of the winning team advance. So nothing has changed on that part. And unless David gives me a funny look, we're going back to having a wild card this year. We're going back to normal, whatever that means. Some of us may have to flash back to, I mean, if you think about it, normal was 3 years ago now, right? The last year we had a normal academic season was 3 years ago. So we may need some refreshers on this. So always, 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 whether you're a first year or a 20th year, people always say, well, what areas will you cover? And I've had that, the slide that used to be up here in this slot, I've had up since I took over the contest, and I copied and pasted it from Bobby Hawthorne. So it's probably been in there forever. So in the last few weeks, I actually gave it a little bit more thought. And I actually tried to get some categories that might be meaningful in terms of sorting things and categorizing things. So when you go back and look at this one, or just do a screen capture of that one, those are some categories that maybe will help you sort things and file things, as opposed to the categories that we used to have on there. But let me tell you what's really important in terms of what we'll cover. What I really think about when I'm trying to decide whether something warrants merit on being on the test. Do we got a question? Why don't you divide up Texas? I'll show you. I'm going to answer that question in a minute. That's actually a good question. Carlton asked, will the state meet be in Austin? David?
We hope so.
Too early to tell, and we hope so. All right, so here's what I really look at when I'm trying to decide whether something's going to be on the test or not. And really, I'm going to hit one of these hard. Is it timely? Right? I get up between 5:30 and 6:30 every morning, take the dog for a walk. Sometimes I sit down and do questions first. Then I watch the news and check out the internet and check my Twitter feed. Right? In general, I write 2 questions a day. One of those may or may not be the tweet, or it may be a third one that I put out in my question of the day on Twitter. So those are all going to be really timely, but it's those questions that form the pool for all of the tests that I write. So they were timely back in August, right? But if you're not taking the test until January, August was a long time ago. I get it, right? I get it. That's why I thought I would try to give you some categories to try to break some things down. Conflict. If something is involving conflict, such as a vote, that's conflict. Such as something going on in Congress where the Republicans and the Democrats are going at it, that's conflict. If there's a court case, that's conflict, right? The one that I look at the most is the consequence. Does this have a wide-ranging impact? So people, a Supreme Court case, for example, a Supreme Court case has a wide-ranging impact. If I'm just looking at a regional court case, that may not have as much impact in the short term, but it might have a lot of impact on us in Texas. So the consequence nationally may not be much, but the consequence to us may be a lot. Prominence, proximity, does it happen in Texas or around Texas? Those things might hit the test more often, but we're going to see that that hasn't been the case recently anyway. Oddity, unusual events, but I'm going to differentiate between oddity and trivia as we go on. And then human interest, newsmakers in a human role. So those are the big things that I look at, the 7 criteria for news. But I want to emphasize consequence, right? It's not, I try really hard not to make this a trivial pursuit contest, to make it stuff that really has impact on your lives. All right, so let me give you a few sample questions. Some of these are new, some of them are old. Let's see how you do. Here's a who question. So when we differentiate the questions by topic, I always differentiate them by the kind of question. Although the move didn't fit the state's flag protocol, Florida's governor in February ordered flags in the state flown at half staff for who? A person the governor called an absolute legend and a great person. David Stevens. No, they didn't do it. That's what I said in the chat. It said, all right, I got a couple D's. Anybody else for D? All right, lots of D's. Correct. Rush Limbaugh. Right, and that was a question somewhere on one of the tests this year. Here's another who question. Who became the face of the coronavirus and one of the leaders of the White House team on the US response to it? Jared Kushner, Anthony Fauci, Jerome Adams, or Tedros Adhanom? And everybody's jumping in because you've seen him. We see him a lot, but we haven't seen him lately. Don't you wonder where he's been at? Is he was on one of the talkies a couple of weeks ago, but I hadn't seen a whole lot of him lately. Do you know he's the highest paid federal government official? The highest paid person in the federal government. Yeah. So he's, in my opinion, he's earning his salary, every penny of it. I wouldn't want his job. So there's a who question. A question that I added, I think this year, maybe last year, and I have a feeling you're going to see more of these, and that is a chart question. And that's based just on having students interpret data from charts. And that is, and strictly in my opinion, I think we're just seeing a lot more data journalism and a lot more charts and graphics in the news. So I've started writing one or more of these as things go on. This one's pretty straightforward. And I concede the fact that you would really have to be able to see the legend in order to understand what this one was. But it's the number of COVID vaccines administered in the US per day. And there's all sorts of clues, right? There's a trend data. It's not on weekends, right? It goes down to 0 on weekends because they don't administer on the weekends. So it's not, I don't tend to be tricky with these questions. They're pretty obvious, but the people do have to know what's going on in the news and how to read a chart. So it combines both of those skills. And I was really happy with the response I got on those this year. So we'll probably see some more of those. Or a what question? This one's pretty easy. According to scientists, there's a 99.9999% chance that what is the cause of climate change? And everybody's going to get this one right because it's humans. That's actually a relatively old question. I think 3 years old. And at the time, it was highly controversial. I don't think it is quite so much anymore. As authorized by the DC mayor, which slogan was printed on the street in front of the White House in June? So this was last year. And the answer is D's. Yes, D's. Black Lives Matter. Is it still there? Has anybody been there? Is it still there?
It's still there.
Still there? Interesting. All right. And then there's another which question. This was from a test this year. Which of the following was not one of the items? And as you're coaching your students, really coach them to look at, what is the question, which and not. And I suggest to my students, underline what kind of question is it so that you're getting the right answer, which was not one of the items mentioned as an emergency priority, and that was COVID-19 relief. All right, so there's a few types of questions out there. Here's a new question. I always say no celebrity questions, but I always come up with a fun celebrity question. So let's see if you know the answer. Which The Little Rascals actor was arrested in Weatherford, Texas in June 2020 after allegedly huffing an air duster? I kid you not, this is an actual news story. He was released on $1,500 bond the following day. Anybody want to guess? I got one guess for B, Billy Buckwheat Thomas. Oh, see, this is why I don't ask these questions, because I really, I'm going to come up and say, who cares, right? It really doesn't matter. It's kind of fun to talk about some guy, but for the record, it was Bug Hall. It wasn't Spanky, Darla, Buckwheat, or Porky. Buck Hall was the guy who played Alfalfa in the movie, if you care about those kinds of things. And the reason you're not going to get these kinds of questions is because even though they're kind of fun, and yes, they might fit the oddity category, I really have a debate about whether there's any consequence on that at all. And so because it just reaches nothing on the level of consequence, even though it might reach some other level, it's not likely to be on the test. We're going to come back to that. Business questions. You know, I've actually seen more of these just by happenstance through the last year or two. A new energy-friendly fleet of delivery vehicles and shorter office hours were just part of a massive 10-year plan DeJoy had to make it so that which business would be more competitive and more modern. I knew that last question would generate some. Yes, the United States Postal Service, a story that is continuing to evolve. Okay. So, but it was back in 2016 that a business question kind of got me in trouble when some people questioned whether it actually had any impact on people's lives. And the question was this, it was a essay question. Before it opened in China, Disney's new movie, Star Wars: The Force Awakens, was breaking records. It was the fastest to gross 1 billion. It had the biggest worldwide opening and it had the biggest worldwide December opening. However, the movie was not without controversy. Discuss some of the issues surrounding the production, blah, 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 blah. And we had some discussion about whether this was a valid business question. And I just look, every time I look at the question, I go back to $1 billion in 12 days, $1 billion in 12 days. Just that alone made it, to me, a valid question. Plus it's Star Wars and I love Star Wars, and it's Disney, which is one of the 4 largest corporate owners of media in the world. So pretty much anything that Disney does is going to fit the prominent scale. And then you've got $1 billion in 12 days. So, and we got some great responses as I went back and looked at the questions. Other types of questions that you won't see, no impossible stuff. And I kept this one in there as a as an impossible one. I don't think anybody's ever known the answer to this one. And besides that, she got fired because she leaked something to the media. And so she wasn't even there that long. But so I ranked that in the impossible category. I have had more numbers questions as it's popped up, I think particularly during the pandemic. And here's an example of a numbers question. President Joe Biden delivered the first primetime of address of his term on March 11th. This was last year. In the 24-minute speech, he pulled out a note on his schedule with the total deaths in the United States from COVID-19, how many? Right, so this is really requiring a student to assimilate, put a lot of things together. Right, it was March of 2021, March of 2021, and then notice that the numbers are radically different. Right, I'm not asking him to differentiate between 23,399,000 and 23,398,000. Right, these are radically different numbers. So the right answer, yes, I agree with Robert, who says 500,000 it's a fair question because 500,000 was so notable. And I agree. And I point out we just reached what milestone most recently? Anybody know? What was our COVID milestone? 600,000 deaths, wasn't it? Right, 600,000 deaths. So yeah, thank you. All right, so, and there's another one, I just put that in there as had a potential for a chart question as well. I could have taken the numbers off the chart, left the scale on it, and put that in there. So just know that the numbers questions that have been on there so far have all been orders of magnitude different, pretty much, right? Now, the one about the midterm elections and how many people are in the Congress, yeah, I do kind of expect our students to know, look, there's, how many people in Congress and how many of them are Republicans and how many of them are Democrats. You should know that, well, the Democrats don't have a majority, so it has to be this set of numbers are which, right? Unemployment numbers. And all of that said, there's a great website you can go to, usdebtclock.org, and then there's the related world debt clock out there. It just has in real time the national debt, how much debt you own per person, what the United States population is, what the world population is, and they're changing in real time. So it's a fascinating one to watch. And it may be a website that you just want to program it to and check it out periodically. Because you could get a question like this one. The United States government's public debt is the highest it's ever been. Given that the United States population is about 330 million, how much debt is there for each person? And I will tell you, I brought this one up at a student activities conference last year and got many moans because it required the students to do math. They had to know what the population was, which I gave them, right? And then they had to know some random approximate figure for the public debt, right? And then they had to do the math, and pretty much in their heads, most of them, you didn't really need a pencil and paper to do it. But again, the answers are orders of magnitude different, right? So people should have been able to figure that one out. All right, so that said, I do want to point out that I tried really, really hard not to put trivia on the test. I looked to make sure things hit multiple news sources, that they're on valid news sources. So the guy in the background here behind Trump, does anybody remember this guy? Plaid shirt guy, right? And it turns out the plaid shirt guy was all over the news. And if you're a big fan of Anthony Downs' attention-getting cycle, I like trivia too, Richard, for the record. He was all over the attention-getting cycle for about a day. And then it was discovered that he was a plant planted by the Trump campaign to draw attention to himself in the background. And so he went out of the news cycle, right? I call that trivia, right? Red shirt guy, red sweater guy, however, there's a little bit of difference. Right? Red sweater guy was all over the news for weeks and weeks and weeks for something that I consider to be very trivial, by the way, but he was on the front page of the New York Times, he was on game shows, he was all over the place, right? So at least ostensibly, to me, there's a difference between plaid shirt guy and red sweater man, right? I don't know if that helps, right? Joe the plumber, ooh, yeah, that's a question. All right, how about this one? Let's see if you know the answer to this one. Hindering delivery of basic supplies to bakeries, hospitals, communication centers, and other vital institutions nearby, as well as worldwide oil supplies, a giant cargo ship ever given blocked what critical waterway in March? This is from the state exam this year. And you won't be surprised to know that only one person out of all of the state competitors got it wrong. It was the most right question on the state exam. So I rank that in my category of too easy. And I won't show you the spreadsheet, but I actually go through and on the state test, rank questions as too hard, just right, or too easy. And I had 5 questions that hit my threshold of too easy this year. So, and this one by far was the most too easiest question. Quote me on that one. How about that? Most too easiest. You're also not going to see any sports game questions. Who won the Super Bowl in 2020? One of the last sporting events played before the country was shut down. Now, you might be a Kansas Chiefs fan. And Richard, you're right, the name of the ship would have been a little bit harder. But you got to throw in some easy questions for these. You don't want to, there's some easy ones in there. All right, so yeah, it was easy that the Kansas Chiefs won the Super Bowl. But notice that almost always there's ways to rephrase those easy questions or sports game questions if they have consequence. Justify won $800,000 at the Belmont Stakes after winning $1.24 million in the Kentucky Derby and $900,000 in the Preakness. He was only the 13th horse in history to capture what elite title? Now, this is asking the students, you could throw away that whole first sentence, right? That's all distraction, right? The second sentence is the key thing, right? And what is the elite title in horse racing? Triple Crown, right? So that's a little bit more than just trivia right there. Environment questions. If you look back at my list, I put science on there. I didn't put the environment as a second topic, but I lumped environmental questions under science. In 2005, there were 27 named storms and 1 unnamed storm. In 2020, there were 30 named storms, a new record. The last named storm, a Category 5 storm was, oops. And this one also requires students to take a little bit more knowledge, right? Because they have to know that, look, there's only 26 letters in the alphabet, and they went through that. So they had to get into the Greek letters. And if they went into the Greek letters, let's see, it was, right? And all they got to do is know that. So it gets them to know a little bit of the Greek alphabet there. Here was a hard question. This was from state in 2017. I point out that only 11% of the students at state in 2017 got this one right. So, and I won't dwell on it too much, except after state, I always go back and look at the questions. And the ones that a lot of people miss, I go, was it a fault of the question? Was it a fault of the wording? Did they just not know? And this one was one I finally decided they just didn't know this one. And I went back and looked. It was definitely in the news media. It was in the New York Times. It was all over the place. But it was only all over the place for a relatively short period of time, a few days. So, okay, right. But it was right off our coast, right? It was right off the coast of Texas and Houston. So it had an impact on Texas as well. Was that a question, Richard?
No.
Oh, all right. So some problem questions. First of all, anytime we have a problem question, David, I'm going to get a phone call from David, or I'm going to call David, or somebody's going to call David, or David's going to call me, and we're going to figure out what to do about it, right? And I have to say, it's awesome working with the OIL staff because it's never a guilt trip. It's never you screwed something up. It's how can we fix this? And he's always thinking about the students. It's always what can we do for the students? So here's an example, right? Why did Democrat National Committee suspend Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign access to the DNC voter database, right? Well, the correct answer is A, but when we sent it out, the answer key said D was correct. Now, those are really close, right? Answer A is focusing on voter information, and answer D is focusing on other candidates, right? So, okay, I see why I made the mistake, but the answer key was wrong, right? So what I want you guys to know is if something like that happens, here's the process we're going to use. You know, either David's going to call me or I'm going to call David. We're going to figure out what the problem is. In this case, it was a simple error on the answer key. So David sent out notification to all the people involved. I think this was a region test to all the people in the region saying the answer key has an error on it, and here's what you need to do, right? It's pretty straightforward, and that's how we handled it, right? So especially on the day of region, but also on the day of district, at state, obviously, I'll be there, but stay in touch with your academic coordinators. And if you think something is wrong, please don't wait. Pick up the phone, call, send an email, send a text to me or to David or Jeannie or somebody, because if it's wrong, the sooner we get the correct information out there, the better. The last thing we want is for somebody to be verified and then find out that there's an answer on the answer key, right? So this is all of us together trying to fix those problems, right? Someone will blame the Russian hackers. That's probably a true statement. And for all it could be the Russian hackers. So here's another example of a question that generated a problem. In a red state known for limiting civil rights protections for LGBT people and regulating who uses which public bathrooms, which candidate for North Carolina governor claimed victory on election night, although the election was too close to call even a week after the election? Now notice that the question, again, if you tell your students, is asking which candidate, right? The problem was the answers down below had the parties of the two potential correct answers, Democrat Roy Cooper and Republican Pat McCrory, backwards, right? Which caused people to freak out, right? But the problem was Roy Cooper was the Democrat, right? And he was the correct answer. So again, you got to go back to what the question is asking. It didn't ask what the party was. It asked you who, which candidate, right? And so the lesson for me was quit putting extraneous information in the answers. If the question is asking which candidate, just put the list of candidates. Don't put the other stuff because you run the risk of errors, right? But this also forced us to change the answer blank. And it's something that I've pointed out for the last couple of years, and I'm going to point it out again this year. What it says is write the letter corresponding to the best response, right? Now, we might get into a discussion over Republican and Democrat, but the question was asking which candidate, and the best response was still Roy Cooper, right? So coach your students to that effect. You know, if let's hope there's no more mistakes like that, but if they see a mistake like that, go for the best response. At some point, you got to pick the best response. Right? Here was another one that popped up this year at the district one. that I thought was awesome. And I was really glad that somebody raised it because it meant people were thinking. You're welcome, Carlton. Bye-bye. So here's the question came in like this. We have a question regarding number 37 on the current events test. And the question was, as required by the Constitution, who presided over the second impeachment trial of former United States President Donald Trump? The person asking the question went on to say, choice C is the correct answer on the key. However, according to the Constitution, the Chief Justice is supposed to preside over it, which is choice A. Do we accept both C and A? Anybody want to know why that's actually wrong? Or want to tell me why that's wrong? Sean, William, Julie, come on, we're my constitutional people. Oh, Jacqueline's gonna get it. Come on, Jacqueline. Oh, Sean, yeah, go for it.
He was a former president. You can't impeach somebody who's not serving anymore.
You can impeach them, but the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court only has to preside over it when it's the sitting president.
Correct.
So the president.
So it should have been C then.
It was correct. So the answer key was correct. The question was correct, right?
Right.
But it took somebody going back and reading the Constitution. I get it, right? So back to my discussion earlier about distractors, that number A was a really good distractor, right? Because had he been the sitting president, it had to be
A.
Right? But he wasn't the sitting president. He was the former United States president, right? So again, coach your students, read the distractors, read the question, go back and read it again. What is the question really asking? And by the way, I never mind that. If you think it's wrong, if you have a hint that it's wrong, go ahead and shoot it over. I'll be glad to come back and say, no, you're wrong, and here's why, right? Which is what happened in this case, and we moved on, right? No big deal, right? Here's another question similar to that one, also from the district 10th this year. Facing multiple crises, including twin hurricanes, earthquakes, the island's debt crisis, corruption scandals, and the pandemic, Pedro was sworn in as governor of what country January 2nd? Julie, your mouth moved, but I couldn't hear you.
Puerto Rico.
I got one vote for Puerto Rico. Anybody else? DDD Puerto Rico. DDD Puerto Rico, right? Absolutely Puerto Rico, right? But here's how one of the questions came in. The question asked about the governor of what country, and all of the answer choices are not countries, but territories. And I have to say, love you all to death, but I kind of rolled my eyes at this one. I'm like, absolutely 100% correct, right? And had one of the answer choices been a country, that would have been a problem, right? But they're all territories, right? They're all territories. So now you're back to picking the best answer, right? And in my defense, for the record, here's the story from NPR that refers to it as a country. And here's the CIA World Book, the definitive source for all information for all ambassadors and so on and so forth. And it refers to Puerto Rico as a country. So in my defense, the CIA thinks of this as a country. Yeah, go ahead.
In the news, they're talking about becoming their own country.
Yeah.
So it fits right into what's going on with current events.
Right, absolutely. And you're probably going to see more of that, right? Especially on DC. They do seem to be making some movement on DC. So you might know how many territories we have. 14, I think it's 14, right? There's 7 that have permanent residence and military presence, but only 7, 5, 6, 7, something like that. But it's something like total territories. So, but see, the question didn't get that picky, right? All of the answers were about territories, and there was a right answer. So, yeah. Just to assure you that we listen to your questions, if I haven't made that abundantly clear, I never mind a question. Here's one from Jonathan Robertson from Sudan. This was a couple of years ago. What disturbed me the most in CIE is that there was a lot of parity among the competitors' scores before the essay was judged. This overweights the importance of the essay at state. I would suggest that the way to make the test less subjective at region and to make it harder at state, something I think the students might quarrel with. But The way to fix the problem is to add more questions at regional and even more at state. Say an increase or 5 or even better at 10 at each level should do it. Now, and I'll tell you, David and I and Andy, we had a big discussion about this. And correct me if I'm wrong, David, this one actually went to legislative council and had a discussion about it. And they chose not to implement the changes, but I just want to say we're listening to you, right? And if you have ideas for changes, please don't. Just because it doesn't get done doesn't mean we didn't really seriously pay attention to it, right? All right, so moving on. Let's get down to the business of some of this stuff. People always ask me, are there ratios of things? Absolutely not. In fact, I don't categorize the questions as I'm writing them. I do go categorize the questions after each state exam because I can gather a lot of data from state because I know what the answers are and I've got all the data, right? So I classify them purely on 5 categories: business, international, national, science, and Texas, because I have a hypothesis. And my hypothesis is that over time, students are going to do the worst on which category? What do you think? Texas, international.
International.
I thought it was going to be international too, because the volume of international news is so big, right? How do you pick the questions? But I will tell you, this year, if we look at state 2021, and we look at the number of questions in those 5 categories, there they are, right? And then we look at the percentage of students that got questions wrong in those categories.
Wow.
Right? So these are huge
That was all over the place.
50% got science questions wrong, right? So science was but twice as bad as Texas was, and almost twice as bad as national, right? But there was only 3 questions on science. So we can't look at any one exam. I've got the state exam from 3 years ago, and I'll probably compile next year's data, and we'll just see if we see any trends there. But that might give you coaches some thoughts on, ooh, maybe I need to spend a little bit more time coaching my students on science stuff, and maybe a little bit less time. Although if you look at the answers here, I'm going to come to your point in just a second, William. Texas looked the best. I did find it fascinating this year as I went back and looked at the exams plural. Even though we had a legislative session going on, there weren't very many Texas questions, and there wasn't much Texas in the news. The legislature was really pretty quiet. So I agree with William, overgeneralization, humanities people getting science questions wrong, correct. So maybe we do need to take that a little bit to heart and go, maybe we need to spend a little bit more on science, the environment, and those things. So then people always ask me, okay, well, come on, those are really broad categories. Can't you just tell us what to study? Great, here you go. Here's my list. There's what you need to study. There you go, copy and next. Okay, so now let's talk about the essay, all right? See, I did that on purpose, right? I really did sit down and come up with a list of things that I thought might be on this coming year's exams, but the list is infinite, right? I mean, I don't know what's going to be in the news, so it's based on whatever's in the news. I don't make up the questions. Some people think I do, but I don't make them up. But anyway, so I thought that was kind of fun to make up that list. All right, so let's talk about the essay for just a little bit. First of all, the essay matters. In fact, it matters so much that we're having an entire session on doing the essay on Thursday. Right? If you haven't gone to that session, I strongly recommend you do. And even if you have gone 2 or 3 years ago, we've got a whole new section to it this year talking about the essay and grading the essay. In particular, grading the essay. And I'm not going to say any more about that right now, except to say we're going to have a whole bunch on that on Thursday. And it was fascinating this year going around to different sites and watching people grade the essays. I don't need to spend a lot of time on this. I probably spend more time at the conferences with the students on this, but you guys can get your hands on essay prompts. So I don't need to give you a lot of time talking about essay prompts, right? But they're pretty standard. I did notice one time that Bobby Hawthorne used an editorial cartoon as an essay prompt, and I've been trying to do that, but I haven't been able to do it yet. All right, so moving on from that, let me just remind you, please go read the Constitution and Contest Rules. If you find any problems with the CNR, let David know, they'll get it fixed. You know, they went through some revisions a while back, So there was one place where I found one thing in one place and one thing in another. So then just let David know they'll get it fixed, right? I also suggest that you, before the start of each season, like this summer, sit down and just read the rules. Just read them, right? Then before you go to a district meet or region or state, sit down and read the rules again, right? Just so that if anything comes up, you're versed on it, right? You're versed on it. All right. So enough about that. Individual scoring is the objective plus the essay. You guys are versed, so I don't need to dwell on that. The top objective scores advance to the essay round. I don't need to dwell on that, right? So here's our answer. Here's our essay scores. We've been through this, most of you before, right? We know that Juan placed first, right? Who places second? Correct, right? Some of you have seen this slide before, but I think it's a point worth mentioning. When students blow off the essay, right? You're going to see evidence on Thursday of why that essay matters in social studies and in current events. And I am a big believer in the essay and the power of the essay. I want students to be able to write down their thoughts, right? So here's where the essay mattered, right? Even though we had a tie for second place, a three-way tie for second place, one of them was moved down to fourth place because of the essay. Could have been second, but got fourth, right? Remember, team scoring is by objective only. We know all that stuff. We don't need to catch that one. Best second banana teams, numbers. I think we're all good on that piece. Here's a question that came up a while back. Can a member of a team who did not place first, second, or third at district, but who advanced with the team, then places first, second, and third as an individual, a region advances an individual? And the answer is yes. And what I always tell my students is, once you're there, right? We don't care how you got there, you're there, right? So, yeah. All right, so I'm going to skip over the numbers for district because we haven't been able to get them yet, but I do want to show you some numbers from state this year. State participation was 145, which David tells me is very much in line with not having the wild cards this year. So it looks a little bit lower than past years, ostensibly due to not having the wild cards. So if you add the 10% there, that pretty much gets us back to where we were. But more interesting to you guys will actually be this. Here's the overall score from the last few years, as well as the high scores and average average scores by conference. So I have a hypothesis on this one as well. And my hypothesis is that over time, students in conference 6A will do better than those in 5A. 5A will do better than 4A. 4A will do better than 3A. 3A will do better than 2A. 2A will do better than 1A. Right? It's not a reflection of the quality of the students, it's a reflection of survival of the fittest, right? There's more students at a 6A school, and so those that gravitate towards current events have to survive more culling than those at a 1A school. At a 1A school, we see a lot more people participating in current events and band and one act and lit crit and whatever, right? And that's much harder to do in a 6A school, right? That said, I mean, I think it was Richard who said he thought the state test was a little bit harder this year. So when you look at the average score, the overall average was a 27.89, which is pretty much in line with the other years. The high score, we'll talk about here in a second, might be a little bit different. We didn't have any perfect scores on the objective portion. So this is how I kind of monitor, was my test out of line, whatever, right? The objective score average this year was 25.4, which is pretty much in line with other years. High of 35 and a low of 10. Essay score average 5.9, pretty much in line with other years. And that was really important to me because we graded our essays this year completely different at state than we've graded them in past years. So this is a validation of the things are just going to work out, right? Even though we graded them in pods this year, instead of grading them all in one big room, things worked out and the averages end up being about the same. So there's some numbers that you can say, no, the test wasn't really any more harder than it's been in past years or any easier. It is disconcerting, just for the record, to have a student make it all the way to state and score a 1 on the essay. That's disconcerting. But we'll talk about that in our essay session on Thursday. So here that same stuff is in a chart form. If you want to do a screen capture of it, and you can get this entire session available on the UIL website. I just put it all in one place there. Highs, high overalls, lows, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, and then winding down here, let's look at some of the questions that were the most missed this year, because I thought this was fascinating. The polar vortex, so we have an environmental science question. The polar vortex brings the season's coldest days to the central states. What is the polar vortex? And the right answer is, and William says writing was harder to teach this past year. Amen, right? Totally agree. What's the right answer here? A, B, C, D. Look at you guys reading every word of the answers, pondering the question, looking at what the question's asking. You're going to give me an answer, and the answer is, Teresa, what do you think the answer is?
A.
Robert says A. Teresa? Eric? Oh, Jacqueline?
A. Oh, sorry.
Right. Here's my hypothesis on this question. My hypothesis on this question is, it's question number, notice that I left the question number in there, is 25. By this point, students are getting tired, right? So they are much more likely to jump to an A or B question as an answer if it looks good than they would have been 10 questions ago, right? A part of the jet stream moving cold winds from the polar regions. Oh, it's got the word polar in it. Yep, that's the right answer. Yeah, doggies, right? It's not a part of the jet stream. The jet stream is a completely different phenomenon.
Yep.
So the answer is D, a gigantic circular upper air weather pattern in the Arctic that envelops the North Pole, right? But I think, look at that, 82% of students missed that one, right? I don't think it's the question, right? I think it's that jet stream polar was in question number A, and they were getting a little tired, and they jumped on the word polar because they weren't sure, so they jumped on the word polar.
Do you know how many weathermen said it was part of the jet stream that brought the cold weather down?
And it's definitely not part of the jet stream.
But that's what it stated on the news.
Well, there's that fake news for you.
There you go.
All right, how about this one? Adidas is exploring shoes that aren't made from animal leather. What is the base material for these new shoes? I got one vote for fungi. Anybody else? Couple of votes for seaweed. This is actually another environmental science question, and the correct answer is A, fungi. Notice that 74% of students, 3 out of every 4 students missed that one, right? And so I dutifully go back and check. This was all over the news. It's actually still all over the news. So it wasn't a question not being covered. Maybe it was outside the realm of what was whatever being studied, but I view that as a business and a science question, and pretty legit, and actually revolutionary. All right, how about this one? Here's an international one, and we said these were going to be the hardest in some ways. Sarah Everard disappeared as she walked home in London on March 3rd and was found dead a week later. Police told women to stay inside for their own safety. What social movement was set off? Oh, William, you're getting me on a technicality now. Isn't there an argument about fungus being animals, not plants? Actually, they're neither. They're in their own kingdom. So, so 21. What's the answer here? Anybody? A, take back the night. It's actually been around a lot longer than this. The correct answer is C, reclaim these streets. And I did another Google search for this one. This one's all over. However, it's all over in Europe. It wasn't all over in America quite as much, right? So I can see that fact that maybe America didn't. Plus, there's so much stuff going on in America right now with the Black Lives Matter movement and all these other movements. I concede the fact that that was a difficult question. All right, so that's our hardest questions. Let's talk about how to do some practicing as you get back to the classroom. As my social media coordinator reminded me on Twitter the other day, it's 56 days until our students return to the classroom. So facepalm, I told them to quit putting that on Twitter. So here's a suggestion for you. I make my students do this every day in my reporting class. We have Kahoot. Anybody use Kahoot? Oh, isn't it awesome? Isn't Kahoot awesome? First of all, it's free. I have the paid version, but you can get a free version of it, right? The students download their app and they can answer the questions on their cell phone. It's free, right? And it gives my students a chance to have their cell phones out in class, in which they feel really privileged to do because everybody else makes them hide them, right? So it's just another little gimmick that I play to work with my students here, right? So Kahoot, you can use the free version of it. You create the questions and they put either red or blue or gold or green as the answer, and then it comes up and puts the answers up on the screen. Very interactive, very playful. It plays music, and David likes the music, and I like the music, right? So you can have some fun with that. You can also, if you pay for it, you can do poll questions and whatever. I actually make my students write the questions. So if they, like I have my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so they have to pick something since the last class. And they have to write between 5 and 10 questions. So, and that makes them also realize just how hard writing current events questions is. So it's a great way. And if you did it once a week, even, you could get your students to pool together on the questions. Maybe everybody writes 5 and you pick the best 15, or somebody picks the best 15 and do that, right? Teresa, hold that thought. I'm going to give you my Twitter handle. Another one is the New York Times weekly news quiz for students. They've stopped doing it during the summer, unfortunately, but it is freaking awesome. It is the second best current events quiz out there. But it's weekly and you can have some fun with it. So you can get your students to engage in that. To be honest, the best news quiz out there is the Slate quiz. And William is laughing because it is freaking hard. Is that a true statement? Yeah, right. I got 11 out of 12 one time, and that's the best I've ever done, right? It is, and they're still putting it out. In fact, were we not running on time, I would go over and play it with you because I haven't looked at this week's test, but I do find it truly to be hard. Your students can do it on their own time. It comes out on Friday afternoons, I think, and you can just, let them play it. And if they're honest, they can write down their scores, whatever. All right. So there's 2 existing current events quizzes that you can take every week. And I'm pretty sure the Slate's going to keep going all summer, because if it's going on June 22nd, why would they stop? But it's hard, and it's time, and it's hard. Did I say it's hard? It's hard. All right, so back to Twitter. If you're not following UIL-CIE on Twitter, there's the handle, @UIL-CIE, right? This has evolved over the years, and I love the way it's evolving. We also have a Facebook account, and you are more than welcome to go join the Facebook account. I put the results to the Twitter polls up in the Facebook account. We share good news, and we share thoughts on the Facebook account, but the life has been on the Twitter account, right? And I got to tell you, if you look at some of the, oh, look at that picture, Richard. Yeah, it came to me by email, but I made sure that picture got dispersed all over the social media. So thank you so much, Richard, for sending me that, because I think it's important for us to recognize our students, especially since we weren't together at state this year, to have a school that was the state champion in both current events and social studies in class 4A. That's impressive. So I made sure that got on our Facebook and our Twitter. Last year, was this last year? Yeah, last year, when we had the Take It Home experience, we also engaged in social media, right? So I put some of this stuff up on our Twitter account, and it stays relatively active. If there's a really big news event, even during the summer, that I suspect is going to impact questions during the fall and spring, I'll put it up even during the summer. So follow it. You get your students to follow it, right? We've got, I don't know how many followers we got now, but it also, don't just be a lurker on it, be a producer of content. If your students do something good at an invitational, or you've got a really cool way to study, or you're doing something new and innovative in Kahoot, share on Twitter, share on Facebook, right? Here's a school that created current events t-shirts for it, because in my Twitter questions, sometimes if it's an open-ended question, I'll say, tell me more. And so they made tell me more t-shirts. And I just thought that was so cool, right? So share that kind of stuff. When we have state, right, here's some of the people that have been in state all 4 years. Now this was 2 years ago, but they've been to state all 4 years of their high school career. Share that kind of information, right? We have a lot of fun with the Twitter account. We put winners up there, and I still stay in touch with a lot of these students that are out there. So look at people just sharing good times here on the Twitter account. People studying games that they're playing with current events. They got to take a selfie with me. I thought that was funny. Right, but there's also some serious stuff that comes across the Twitter account. Right, yep, there's my serious one. But here's one of my favorite, and that's one of my favorites, and here's my favorite one of all time. No, that's not it. My favorite one of all time is that one right there, right? UIL CIE is a large part of why I want to pursue a political science. That means that we made an impact on these kids' lives, right? And sometimes people chastise UIL, why are we doing UIL? We're making a difference in kids' lives. And that's what we use social media for, right? So get on the social media and have some fun with it. Tout your successes. Let people know if there's a failure that other people can learn from. Show off those medals, show off those trophies, tag your school district in it so the people at the district office get to see that they can retweet it. All right, so lastly here is, I really am winding down because I'm 3 minutes over. People always say, well, where do you get your news from? Well, here you go. Here's where I get my news from. USA Today, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, Dallas Morning News, Houston Chronicle, right. But like today or yesterday, I guess, I was paying attention to the Supreme Court ruling on the NCAA. And okay, you can go, okay, well, you got your news from NPR. Actually, I went to Nina Totenberg's Twitter account to find the best accounting of that Supreme Court thing, right? So yeah, my slides here says National Public Radio, but you kind of got to take it all with a grain of salt, right? Because there's reporters that work for Texas Monthly that I follow religiously, right? There's reporters for the Dallas Morning News that I follow. I may not read the entire Austin American Statesman, so it's all of this stuff put together and then other sources beyond this, right? I do try very, very hard to watch multiple news media outlets on television. I don't just watch CNN, I can't anymore. And I don't just watch Fox News, right? I watch ABC and Fox News and MSNBC and I just try all of these different things. My mom's television, I tried to block Fox News on her television because that's all she watches. I'm like, Mom, you need to experience more than just that. But that's hard telling my 80-year-old mom that. So one that I want to point out that you may or may not be aware of, and that's the Texas Tribune. KUT at Austin, the National Public Radio affiliate in Austin, is trying a new experiment, Texas Radio, I think is what they're calling it, that we're going to be watching really closely because they're going to be in direct competition with the Texas Tribune, which is a nonprofit, basically a blog site that also does a lot of events. But so I don't know how we're going to get that besides going to their website. But Texas Tribune is the definitive authoritative source for news that is in Texas. Right? I used to be able to say that was the Dallas Morning News. Now it's the Texas Tribune. So I would put that up on the list of sources to consider. All right, in our last few minutes here, I'm going to give you some information that you probably have not been able to get through any other source. So if you're going to take pictures of a slide, this is probably the one, this one and the next one, because here's the dates for 21, 22. Pretty much the same as the last time we were at a real year, right? But what you really care about is not the dates for the contest. What you really care about is those cutoff dates. It is by far the most often asked question that I am given, right? And remember, you can get this entire presentation on the website as well as watch the video again, or I'll send it to you an email. In fact, this is all going to be on the Twitter account later today. So the cutoff dates for 2021, 2022 are based on when I have to have the state materials to the state office in order to get them disseminated out to all the invitational sites, right? So David and Glenda and I work together, and I'm always begging for one more day. Can I get one more day? Can I get one more day? Can I get one more day? Right? And they're always saying yes, yes, and I feel like I'm causing hardship on it. But especially for the invitational dates, here's the cutoff dates. And you notice we got a 2-week Christmas break in there in the middle where not a lot of stuff happens. So that's why that one's so early. And then district has the same start date but a different end date, right? And that's to give me a little bit of fudge in the event that there's no news towards the end of the year, which sometimes happens, right? However, if I can make it till say September 1st, if I can not put August stuff on the district test, I will keep it as current as I can and still get 40 good questions, right? Region October 4th to March 7th, state December 1st, April 29th, and that's predicated on the fact that I can duplicate the test and bring it down myself, that one. So that buys us a little bit more time on that. All right, so in closing here, and my 112 out of 115 slides here, get started now. And I really do mean now. I don't mean waiting until August, right? Get that team organized, start getting people, the band people have already started figuring out who's going to be the drum major and all that kind of stuff. We should be doing the same thing in current issues and events. Read that contest manual, right? Read last year's, read the year before, read the one from 10 years ago. It really hasn't changed all that much. Start engaging in social media, follow UIL CIE, or my personal Twitter account is Bradley Wilson 09 on Twitter. If you want to follow me, but all the good stuff's on UIL CIE. Right, so get you and your students engaging in that, both producing content if something good happens and being lurkers on the site. Start collecting and storing data, even though it doesn't start until August. Stuff is happening now that's going to influence questions during the year. Practice regularly, and I would even suggest, football teams have two-a-days. Can you get together before school starts and start institutionalizing that practice? Start getting those Kahoot questions organized. Figure out how are we going to do this? How are we going to practice essay questions? We're going to talk more about that on Thursday. By all means, attend at least one, if not two or more invitational meets. Some of these only have objective questions that are online, or you can go to a big one that's got objective and the essay questions on it, or you can make your own. Right? Certainly practice writing and evaluating essays. I think is a great experience for your students to learn how to write an essay as well as answer it. And something I don't think we emphasize enough, and that is have fun. Right? At the point that this starts to become work and drudgery for you and for your students, we failed. Right? This has got to be something that they want to do, that they can play with, that they can take pride in doing. So make it fun, whatever that means. I think Kahoot is just a great way to make something that could be a little dry, a little bit more fun. So here's a closing quote. Sometimes when we see what's going on in the world around us, it can change our entire perspective on life. We might want to start volunteering with Habitat for Humanity or an animal rescue group. Knowing how and why our world is functioning the way it is right now makes us a lot more knowledgeable about how we might be able to change it in the future. So people say, why are we studying current events? That's why. Here's my Twitter account and my Gmail address. Please don't hesitate to shoot me an email 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That doesn't mean I'm going to see it right away, but my phone always goes ding unless I've got it turned off like I do right now. All right, so don't hesitate to shoot me an email address. I'll answer it. David is religious about his email, and sometimes I think David does answer his emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. So if you don't get an answer from me in a timely fashion, or you just want to talk to David, by all means, shoot David an email. And there's my Twitter account as well. And so I end by saying, what questions do you got? Oh,
I had one.
shoot.
International news. I mean, I'm Irish, so I read the Guardian and the London Times and things like that. So my kids get another another point of view. So do I bring that in also? Because we do
Sure.
cover.
Sure, the Guardian is my #1 source, but something was happening over in Europe this year. I don't remember why. And I just went to today's front pages on the Freedom Forum site. And you can go to today's front pages and you can get all the front pages from all over the world. And I just started looking, is that whatever, I don't remember what it was, but is that news in some place besides that one country? Because it was starting to make news in America, but not really. And it didn't actually. It was a question that I cut because I didn't think it was widespread enough news.
So it's, you called it Freedom Forum?
Yeah, here, I'll get you the link right now.
Okay.
It's actually what I probably should put on mine. site. It was a story idea that I got from the Guardian, but so Amanda asked, so for professional hours, we fill out the PDF, and David says correct. And it looks like they can go for that 90 minutes, right, David? Any more questions, thoughts?
I'll let you go.
Eric,
I apologize. Sorry, I came in a little late because I'm also grading for the AP World History exam. But I was just curious about what possible changes or things we can expect because of Governor Abbott signing in the anti-critical race theory, or regulating what current events we can and can't, like, because it's an extracurricular, so it's not part of the curriculum per se. Okay.
That's my thinking. David, feel free to share any thoughts you had. But that legislation controlled what and how things can be taught in the classroom. I saw no impact on UIL CIE. David?
Don't know yet.
Don't know yet.
Do what your district tells you to do.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, because it could have, I mean, especially if you're teaching it as part, right? You have to do what your administrators tell you, right? Agreed with that. Good point. Absalom, you had a question?
Yeah, I asked about the Jazeera. How do you look at it and how often would you use it? Because I know it kind of is a good article for the Middle East and North Africa.
Yeah, it's actually really good perspective on American news too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't look at Al Jazeera every day. I actually used to look at Al Jazeera every day. I don't now. I don't know why. But it's up there in a list of things that I look at for sure. If I know something's happening in the Middle East, absolutely. But Al Jazeera is also, sometimes if I wonder whether something is really news, crossing the line in between trivia and news, Al Jazeera is a place I'll go to. Are they covering this story? Because they cover America from another perspective.
Okay.
I like multiple perspectives of things. Yes, Erica says, I have my kids download as many international news apps like BBC and Al Jazeera. Certainly BBC. BBC is another one that has another perspective on American news. So sometimes I get my best national news questions out of the BBC. Jacqueline, you looked frustrated there.
No, my husband is frustrating. Sorry. Oh, hush, Erica.
Already the rivalry started. It's barely June, Jackie.
Hey, it's ongoing. You know that.
We're in
All
the
right,
same
domestic
town and we're
squabble.
rivals. We're in the same town and we're rivals. That's why.
There you go. There you go. I like rivals. A little friendly rivalry never hurt anybody, right?
Yeah,
Right, Richard?
I told our professor, because we had classes together also, and I just told her she's my frenemy.
And there you go. I like it. One of the things I like about this group historically is that we can also agree to disagree. It's like, all right, but moving on. Richard, I like your background too. He's typing something. Mike? You don't have a mic? Because Richard, I was going to ask you, come on, you won the championship, I don't know how many years in 4A. What's your advice for these people? He's typing. Study everything, constantly challenge your students.
It's
I
hard.
think-
It's hard to stay ahead of your kids, but you have to try. And that, doing both current events and social studies is amazingly hard. I'm trying to bring another teacher in to help me, but when you can get together with your students, always have new things to challenge them with, because I don't know, being, well over 50, pushing 60, you look at news totally different than a 16-year-old does. And combining the two, high school students with your experience is the best combination. It really is. Anyway, I enjoyed it, but it almost killed me this year. It was just so much work. However, after about a month's break, I'm ready to go again. So
I think Richard has a unique, and maybe not so unique program where his students really do push him as much as he pushes his students. And I can see that every time they interact. And that to me is the key to a successful program, right? When you've got this dialogue going on. That's really cool.
I had a great combination of experience and young blood this year. I've got overall had very experienced teams, and I'm only losing 2 seniors, but out of the 10, I actually had 11 in social studies and 6 in current events start out. However, it was my freshmen that came in and pushed my older students to say, I don't want to lose a spot to them, and still had a freshman, kind of a phenom, step up that, you always got to be recruiting. One of the keys is recruiting hungry students. You have to build it into them and tell them those gold medals are the same ones that the football players and the track stars get. And they
scholarship. All they have to do is make it to state to be eligible for scholarships.
My kid that I lost to Stanford this year had almost $5 million worth of scholarship offers from 19 universities. And he went where his older brother, there's 5 state championships between his older brother and himself. And there would have been probably 6 if we hadn't missed last year. So pretty amazing stuff, but you got to replace those kind of kids.
And I agree with what we've said about recruitment. Recruitment is key. And I don't know that anybody's ever shown me the numbers, but I'd be willing to bet you that more juniors win at state than seniors.
Yes. Seniors get distracted.
They get distracted. Right?
And, especially if they've done it multiple times and they're like, well, I want this. However, I have to write a salutatorian speech. I have to do this. I have to put together the band presentation.
College applications.
Tremendous college applications. And I've got 8 juniors coming back. And so I'm excited, yet I'm also horrified knowing what's going on, in those kids' lives. So we'll see.
And the problem with having 8 juniors is 2 years from now you're in trouble, right?
Yes.
So I'm glad you guys are talking about recruitment, because it's something we probably should talk more about. Keeping a line in succession, especially when you've got 5 students, 4 of them can go, right? But the only thing I'll say really about that is, remember, you can take as many invitationals as you want, right? So take them, let them, that friendly competition. Yeah, and I agree. Your students are your best recruiters, and people want to be a part of something successful. So be successful, and then the recruiting starts happening naturally. All right, well, if there's no more questions, I'm going to turn it back over to David. And hopefully I will see you Thursday with Andy talking about essays.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. We appreciate all your expertise and all the information, and most importantly, your love for this contest, and your positivity and love for what you do and what you provide is evident. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. It is a good group.